Chapter 1. The Inheritance. As Isla Winters signed the final dissolution papers, her hand trembled. Not from grief, but from the intoxicating rush of freedom. 5 years of marriage to Marcus had ended not with the affair she'd discovered, but months before, when she'd stopped recognizing herself in the mirror. "That concludes everything," her attorney, Robert Chin, said with practiced professionalism. "The restaurant is entirely yours now. Marcus has no claim to Ember and Sage, despite his contributions to the initial investment." Isla slid the documents across the polished mahogany desk. "Thank you, Robert. I know dealing with his legal team wasn't easy." "Speaking of unexpected developments," Robert said, reaching for a separate folder, "there's another matter. You've inherited property." Isla's eyebrows rose. "I'm sorry. Your great-aunt, Vivian Winters, passed away 2 months ago. You weren't close, I understand, but she's left you her estate in the Colorado Rockies." Robert opened the folder, revealing photographs of a stunning timber lodge surrounded by aspen groves and pine forests. "It's quite remarkable. 80 acres near Wolf Creek summit, completely off-grid but impeccably maintained." Memories flickered through Isla's mind. A childhood summer when she was 9, before her parents had deemed Aunt Vivian too unconventional for regular visits. She remembered a silver-haired woman who taught her to identify constellations and told her to never trust a man who talks more than he listens. "I had no idea she even remembered me," Isla said softly, studying the photographs. The lodge looked like something from an architectural magazine. All stone and timber with floor-to-ceiling windows that promised breathtaking mountain views. "According to her will, she specifically wanted you to have it," Robert said. "There's also a personal letter, though there's one complication we need to discuss." Isla's stomach nodded. After months of Marcus's complications, she was exhausted by unpleasant surprises. "What kind of complication?" "The property has an existing caretaker agreement that must be honored. Someone has been living in the guest cottage for the past 3 years under what appears to be a very unusual arrangement." Robert looked distinctly uncomfortable. The agreement references some rather archaic property laws about land stewardship and protection services. "It's been properly notarized and filed, giving the caretaker rights to remain on the property as long as certain obligations are fulfilled." "So I inherit a lodge with a built-in tenant," Isla said flatly. "Can't we just buy him out?" "You could attempt it, but the agreement renews automatically every 15 years. The next renewal is in 4 weeks. If you want to terminate the arrangement, it must be done before then." Isla looked at the photographs again. After the divorce, after losing her sense of self in Marcus's shadow, she desperately needed somewhere quiet to think. Somewhere far from the Seattle restaurant scene where everyone knew about her failed marriage. "I'll take it," Isla decided. "I need time away from the city, and this looks perfect. 1 person for 4 weeks I can handle." Robert smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him in months of legal proceedings. Vivian would be pleased. She always said the mountains had a way of showing people who they really are. As Isla gathered the inheritance papers, she found Vivian's letter, a thick cream envelope sealed with actual wax. Her gray-tant's elegant script across the front read, "For Isla, when she's ready to claim her true strength." Isla tucked the letter into her purse unread. Whatever secrets Vivian had left behind could wait until she reached the mountains. Right now, all she wanted was escape. From Marcus's betrayal, from the pitying looks of her restaurant staff, from the city that had witnessed her unraveling. The lodge in the photographs looked like the perfect sanctuary. She had no idea that some sanctuaries came with guardians, or that Vivian's caretaker was about to turn her carefully planned solitude into something far more extraordinary than she'd ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Guardian. The first thing Isla noticed about her inherited lodge was how impossibly perfect it looked. The timber gleamed with fresh oil. The stone pathways showed no signs of neglect. The gardens overflowed with late autumn blooms that someone had clearly been tending with expert care. The second thing she noticed was smoke curling from the guest cottage chimney. Isla parked her loaded SUV in the circular drive, her peaceful retreat fantasy crumbling with reality. Robert had mentioned a caretaker, but seeing actual evidence of occupancy felt intrusive. After 5 years of Marcus making decisions about their shared space without consulting her, the last thing she wanted was another man assuming he belonged in her territory. She grabbed her purse and marched toward the guest cottage, rehearsing the professional but firm speech she'd prepared during the 8-hour drive from Seattle. Clear boundaries. mutual respect. Separate spaces. The cottage door opened before she could knock, revealing a man who made her prepared speech evaporate entirely. He was tall, easily 6'4", with the kind of lean, powerful build that spoke of outdoor work rather than gym memberships. Dark auburn hair fell to his collar in waves that suggested he'd never bothered with a professional stylist. But it was his eyes that stopped her completely. Storm gray with flecks of silver, studying her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "You must be Isla," he said, his voice carrying a slight roughness like distant thunder. "I'm Cade Thornwood. I've been maintaining the property for Vivian." "Right," Isla managed, then immediately felt foolish. "Yes, I'm Isla Winters, the new owner." Cade's mouth curved into a slight smile. "Vivian mentioned you had her directness. She said you'd inherited the family fire along with the property." The casual mention of her great-aunt sent an unexpected pang through Isla's chest. "You knew her well?" "Well enough to know she'd want you to feel at home here," Cade said, stepping back slightly. "Would you like me to show you around the main lodge? I've been keeping it ready for your arrival." Isla blinked, thrown by his assumption that he'd known she was coming. "How did you never mind?" "Yes, I'd like to see the lodge. But first, we need to discuss your living arrangements." Something shifted in Cade's expression, not defensive but more guarded. "Of course. Would you prefer to have that conversation inside? I just made coffee." The offer was perfectly reasonable, but Isla's divorce-honed instincts kicked in. Don't enter enclosed spaces alone with strange men. Don't accept beverages you haven't prepared yourself. Don't trust anyone who seems too... "I'm fine talking out here," Isla said, hating how paranoid she sounded but unable to help herself. "Look, Cade, I'm sure you're perfectly competent, but I wasn't expecting a roommate. I came here for solitude, and I'm not comfortable with this arrangement." Cade studied her for a long moment, his silver-flecked eyes seeming to catalog details she wasn't sure she wanted him to notice. "I understand. Moving to an unfamiliar place is stressful, especially when you're dealing with unexpected situations." The gentle understanding in his voice was somehow worse than if he'd argued. Isla had spent months preparing for conflict, learning to defend her boundaries against Marcus's manipulations. She didn't know how to handle a man who seemed to actually listen. "It's not about stress," Isla said, though it absolutely was. "It's about boundaries and expectations. This is my property now, which means I determine who lives here." "You're absolutely right," Cade agreed calmly. "But there are some legal complexities you should understand before making final decisions." "What kind of legal complexities?" Cade gestured toward the main lodge. "Vivian left documents that explain the situation better than I can. Would you be willing to review them before deciding whether you want me to leave?" The reasonable request made Isla feel petty for her suspicions. But Marcus's betrayal had taught her that reasonable men were often the most dangerous. "Fine," Isla said. "But I want to see these documents immediately, and I'm calling my attorney to verify anything unusual." Cade's smile was warm enough to transform his face from handsome to devastating. "I wouldn't expect anything less from Vivian's heir." As they walked toward the main lodge, Isla found herself noticing details that spoke of genuine care. The porch steps were perfectly maintained. Wind chimes hung at precise heights to catch breezes, without creating noise pollution. Someone had put real thought into making this place welcoming. "You've done beautiful work maintaining everything," Isla admitted reluctantly. "This place deserves respect," Cade said simply. "Vivian created something special here." The reverence in his voice when he mentioned Vivian made Isla feel ashamed of her own distance from the woman who'd left her this sanctuary. She'd been so focused on protecting herself from potential threats that she hadn't considered the possibility that Cade might actually belong here as much as she did. The main lodge door opened with a key Cade produced from his pocket, and Isla felt another flicker of unease. "You have a key to my house?" "Caretaking responsibilities," Cade said, holding up the keyring. "But I'll turn these over immediately if you decide you don't want me to continue." The immediate offer to relinquish access surprised Isla. Marcus had hoarded control over every aspect of their lives, refusing to give her access to accounts she'd helped fund. Cade's willingness to transfer authority felt almost too good to be true. "Let's see those documents," Isla said, following him into the lodge that was about to become either her perfect retreat or her latest nightmare. Chapter 3. The Compact Revealed. The interior of Vivian's lodge took Isla's breath away. Soaring ceilings with exposed timber beams. a massive river rock fireplace, furniture that managed to be both rustic and refined. Every surface gleamed with meticulous care, and fresh wildflowers in copper vases suggested someone had been preparing for her arrival. Aunt Vivian had incredible taste, Isla murmured, running her fingers along a hand-carved dining table. She designed most of this herself, Cade said, moving toward an antique secretary desk in the corner. Vivian was remarkably talented. She could build furniture, cultivate impossible gardens, and negotiate agreements that kept everyone safe. Agreements? Isla asked, noting the odd phrasing. Cade paused in his search through the desk drawers. The documents will explain better than I can. He handed her a leather portfolio secured with a brass clasp, the kind of formal presentation that suggested serious legal weight. Isla settled into a leather wingback chair and opened the portfolio, revealing papers that looked both official and strangely archaic. The first document was titled, Protection Compact between the Winters Bloodline and the Thornwood Pack, renewed every 15 years under the authority of the Hunter's Moon. Isla looked up at Cade, who was watching her with careful attention. This is some kind of historical reenactment thing, right? Like a living history society. Keep reading, Cade said gently. The compact language was formal and specific, outlining an agreement where the Thornwood Pack provided protection services for Winter's property in exchange for sanctuary rights for the Pack's alpha. The current term was set to expire in 4 weeks during something called a Hunter's Moon ritual. Cade, Isla said slowly, this document is talking about werewolves. Yes, it is. Isla waited for the punchline, the explanation that this was some elaborate local tradition or historical curiosity. When Cade simply continued watching her with those serious silver eyes, she felt genuine alarm. You're telling me my great-aunt signed a legal contract with werewolves. Vivian was a remarkable woman who understood that some things exist beyond what most people accept as reality, Cade replied carefully. Isla set the portfolio aside and stood, needing physical distance from whatever elaborate delusion or scam she was dealing with. Okay, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested. Werewolves aren't real. This compact is meaningless, and you need to pack your things and leave my property. Cade remained perfectly still, his expression patient but sad. I know how this sounds. Vivian had the same reaction when she first learned the truth. The truth? Isla's voice rose with frustration. The truth is I'm a recently divorced woman trying to start over, and the last thing I need is some delusional mountain man who thinks he's a supernatural creature invading my space. You're right to be cautious, Cade said calmly. Trust shouldn't be given lightly, especially when you've been hurt before. The gentle acknowledgement of her pain stopped Isla's building rant. Don't psychoanalyze me. Just because I mentioned divorce doesn't mean you know anything about my situation. I know enough to recognize someone who's been betrayed by a person they trusted, Cade said quietly. I know what it looks like when someone builds walls to protect themselves from being hurt again. Isla felt exposed, seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly validating. That doesn't make you a werewolf. No, Cade agreed. But it makes me someone who understands why proving my nature is necessary before asking for your trust. Vivian made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would show her heir the truth in whatever way they could accept. Cade, Isla said, backing toward the door. Whatever you're planning. I'm going to shift into my wolf form, Cade said matter-of-factly. It's the only way to prove this compact isn't a game or delusion. You have my word I won't hurt you or threaten you in any way. This is insane. Yes, Cade said with a rueful smile. It usually is. Before Isla could protest further, Cade began to change. It wasn't the violent Hollywood transformation she might have expected, all screaming and breaking bones. Instead, it was fluid and natural, like watching someone step out of clothing that didn't quite fit. Cade's human form seemed to blur and reshape, muscles shifting beneath skin that sprouted thick auburn fur. His face elongated into a powerful muzzle, his hands became massive paws, and within moments, a wolf stood where Cade had been. The wolf was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Larger than any natural animal, with intelligent silver eyes that were unmistakably Cade's. He sat back on his haunches and waited, making no aggressive moves, simply existing as living proof that Isla's rational worldview had been completely wrong. Isla stared, her mind struggling to process what she'd witnessed. This isn't possible. The wolf tilted his head slightly, and somehow that small gesture conveyed both understanding and patience. Slowly, the transformation reversed, fur receding, bones reshaping, until Cade stood before her again, fully human and somehow still clothed. "The compact is real," Cade said quietly. "The protection is real. And the choice of whether to honor Vivian's agreement is entirely yours." Isla sank back into the wingback chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Werewolves are real. Among other things," Cade confirmed. "Vivian spent 40 years mediating between the supernatural world and human communities. She helped establish peaceful coexistence in this region. And now that responsibility falls to me. Only if you choose to accept it," Cade said, settling into the chair across from her. "The compact expires in 4 weeks. If you decide not to renew it, the Thornwood Pack will find another way to protect our territory." Isla looked around the lodge that had seemed like a perfect sanctuary just an hour ago. "What exactly does protection involve?" "Keeping supernatural threats away from human communities," Cade explained. "Maintaining the balance that prevents exposure of our world to people who aren't ready to know we exist. Making sure families like yours can live safely without ever knowing about the dangers we handle. And in exchange, the Pack's Alpha, me, has sanctuary rights on this property. A safe place to retreat when necessary. Neutral ground for resolving disputes with other supernatural groups." Isla studied Cade's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. "You've been living here for 3 years?" "Yes. Vivian and I worked closely together during that time. And if I don't renew the compact," Cade's expression grew carefully neutral, "then I pack my things and leave, and you never have to think about werewolves again." The offer should have been reassuring, but something in Cade's tone suggested complications he wasn't mentioning. But the protection would end too," Cade admitted. "Other supernatural groups might see this territory as unclaimed and available for their own purposes." Isla felt the weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. "So I can either accept a supernatural roommate I didn't ask for, or potentially put innocent people in danger. Those are the basic options," Cade said. "I know it's not fair to burden you with choices you never wanted to make." Isla closed her eyes, thinking about Marcus's constant manipulation, the way he'd presented her with false choices designed to benefit him while making her feel like she had control. "How do I know you're not just manipulating me into agreeing to something that serves your interests?" When she opened her eyes, Cade was watching her with an expression of profound sadness. "You don't. You have no reason to trust me and every reason to be suspicious of men who ask you to make life-altering decisions based on their word alone." The honest acknowledgement was so different from Marcus's gaslighting that Isla felt tears threaten. "I can't handle another situation where someone controls my life through obligations I don't understand." "Then don't," Cade said simply. "Take time to process this information. Read through all of Vivian's documents. Ask me any questions you have. Make whatever decision feels right to you, and I'll respect it completely." Isla looked at the compact papers scattered around her, evidence of a world she'd never imagined. "And you'll just wait while I figure this out? I'll be in the guest cottage if you need anything," Cade said, standing. "The main lodge is yours, Isla. I won't enter without permission, and I won't pressure you for a decision before you're ready." As Cade moved toward the door, Isla found herself calling after him. "Cade, why does the compact expire specifically during a hunter's moon?" He paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Because that's when the magic is strongest. When bindings can be made or broken permanently." "Magic?" Cade's smile was gentle and slightly sad. "Read Vivian's journals, Isla. There's so much more to this world than you know." After he left, Isla sat alone in the lodge that had become infinitely more complicated than the simple retreat she'd envisioned. She picked up Vivian's journals and began to read, unaware that 4 weeks wasn't nearly enough time to understand the true scope of what her great-aunt had left her, or the ways that Cade Thornwood was about to change everything she thought she knew about trust, courage, and the strength required to build a life worth living. Chapter 4. Setting Boundaries. Isla woke on her second morning at the lodge to the sound of an axe splitting wood and the rich aroma of coffee drifting through her bedroom windows. She'd spent most of the previous night reading Vivian's journals, her worldview expanding and fracturing with every page. Her great-aunt's precise handwriting documented decades of supernatural encounters, compact negotiations, and carefully maintained relationships with creatures Isla was still struggling to accept as real. She dressed quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt, needing caffeine and normalcy before facing whatever came next. Through the kitchen window, She could see Cade in the yard between the lodge and guest cottage, methodically splitting logs with an axe that looked like an extension of his own body. Each swing was precise and powerful, sending chunks of wood flying in perfect arcs. Isla poured herself coffee from the pot that had somehow appeared on her counter overnight and stepped onto the porch, wrapping her fingers around the warm mug for comfort. "Good morning." Cade paused mid-swing, turning to face her with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased by her presence. "Morning. I hope I didn't wake you." "The coffee smell did, but I don't mind," Isla said, then immediately wondered if that sounded too friendly. She needed to establish clear boundaries before this arrangement went any further. "Actually, we should talk about expectations." Cade set down the axe and moved closer, though he stopped several feet away. Close enough for conversation, but far enough to respect her personal space. "Of course. What do you need?" The immediate acceptance of her authority was so different from Marcus's resistance to any boundaries that Isla had to regroup her prepared speech. "I've been thinking about this situation all night, and if we're going to coexist for the next 4 weeks, we need clear rules." "That makes sense," Cade said. "What would make you most comfortable?" Isla pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Notes she'd made at 3 in the morning when sleep proved impossible. "First, the main lodge is my private space. No entering without explicit permission, even for maintenance issues. If something needs fixing, ask first." "Understood." "Second, I need advance notice if you're expecting other pack members or supernatural visitors. I don't want to walk into situations I'm not prepared for." "I can do that," Cade agreed. "Though I should mention that my pack brothers check in periodically for security reports. I can arrange to meet them elsewhere if you prefer." Isla appreciated that he was already thinking of ways to accommodate her concerns. "Let's start with meeting elsewhere and see how it goes. Third," she continued, consulting her notes again, "I need to understand what protection services actually entail. Are we talking about scary things in the woods, or are there genuine threats I should be worried about?" Cade's expression grew more serious. "Both, unfortunately. This territory has been peaceful for 15 years because of the compacts Vivian maintained. But there are supernatural groups that would love to claim this area for themselves. Rogue werewolves, hunters who target our kind, creatures that see humans as prey rather than neighbors." A chill ran down Isla's spine. "And you handle these threats alone?" "Usually. The Thornwood pack is small but experienced, and most potential problems are resolved through negotiation rather than confrontation." Cade paused, studying her face. "Are you having second thoughts about staying here?" Isla considered the question seriously. The rational part of her mind was screaming that she should pack up and return to Seattle immediately, before she got in over her head with supernatural politics she didn't understand. But another part, the part that had felt more peaceful in 2 days at the lodge than she had in months of city living, refused to be driven away by fear. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "This is my inheritance, my home now. But I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Something that looked like respect flickered in Cade's silver eyes. "Vivian said you had her backbone." I can see what she meant. The compliment warmed Isla more than it should have. "What's fourth on your list?" Cade asked. Isla consulted her notes again. "Personal boundaries. We're essentially housemates for the next 4 weeks, but this isn't a social situation. I'm not looking for friendship or anything more complicated." Cade nodded, though something in his expression suggested her words had stung. "Purely professional relationship." "I understand. It's not personal," Isla said quickly, then wondered why she felt the need to soften the boundary. "I'm just not in a place where I can handle complicated relationships right now." "You don't need to explain," Cade said gently. "You've been clear about your needs, and I'll respect them completely." The easy acceptance should have been reassuring, but Isla found herself feeling slightly disappointed by his lack of protest, which was ridiculous. She just established exactly the relationship she wanted. "Is there anything else?" Cade asked. Isla consulted her list again. "What about practical things? Meals, household responsibilities, utility costs." "The property is completely off-grid," Cade said. "Solar power, well water would heat. Vivian designed it to be self-sufficient. As for meals, I usually cook for myself in the guest cottage kitchen, but I'm happy to share if you'd prefer not to cook alone." The offer was practical and considerate, but Isla could imagine how quickly shared meals might erode the professional boundaries she was trying to establish. "Let's keep cooking separate for now." Of course. Cade glanced toward the wood pile he'd been working on. I should mention that I've been handling maintenance and improvements on both buildings. Vivian always encouraged upgrades that made the property more comfortable. Isla looked around the yard, noting details she'd missed the day before. New solar panels on the guest cottage roof, recently stained deck railings, a stone path between buildings that looked hand-laid. You've done a lot of work. This place matters to me, Cade said simply. Taking care of it feels like honoring Vivian's memory. The reverence in his voice when he mentioned her great-aunt made Isla's chest tight with guilt. She'd barely known Vivian, had made minimal effort to maintain contact, and now she was inheriting the fruits of a relationship she'd never bothered to nurture. She left me a letter, Isla said impulsively. I haven't read it yet. Vivian was good with timing, Cade said. She probably knew you'd read it when you were ready to hear what she had to say. Were you close? Cade considered the question. She became like family to me after I lost my own. Vivian had a gift for knowing what people needed, even when they couldn't articulate it themselves. What did you need? The personal question surprised them both. Isla hadn't intended to ask anything so intimate, but something about Cade's careful loneliness reminded her of her own. Purpose, Cade said after a moment. A reason to believe that protecting others was worth the cost of isolation. Isla studied his face, noting the way pain flickered behind his composed expression. You've been alone for a long time. By choice mostly. Leadership requires certain sacrifices. That sounds lonely. Cade's smile was rueful. It can be. But loneliness is better than the alternatives I've experienced. The cryptic comment suggested a story Isla didn't have the right to ask about, given the boundaries she'd just established. Still, she found herself curious about the experiences that had shaped Cade's careful distance from others. I should let you get back to your wood splitting, Isla said, stepping back toward the lodge door. Thank you for being so accommodating about the rules. Thank you for giving me the chance to stay, Cade replied. Not everyone would be so open-minded about inheriting a supernatural roommate. As Isla returned to the lodge, she found herself watching Cade through the kitchen window as he resumed his work. His movements were fluid and efficient, suggesting strength held carefully in check. There was something almost meditative about the way he approached the task, as if the physical rhythm helped quiet whatever thoughts occupied his mind. She'd established clear boundaries, practical arrangements, and professional distance. So why did she find herself wondering what Cade's story was? And why did the sight of him working to maintain her property make her feel cared for in a way she'd forgotten was possible? Isla forced herself to focus on unpacking her belongings and reviewing more of Vivian's documents. She had 4 weeks to decide whether to renew a supernatural compact that would permanently tie her to this world. The last thing she needed was to complicate that decision with inconvenient attraction to the man whose future depended on her choice. But as she settled at Vivian's desk to read, the sound of splitting would provide a comforting rhythm that made her feel safer than she had in months. And if that safety happened to be provided by a werewolf who looked at her like she was worth protecting, well, that was just an additional complication she'd have to manage. Professional boundaries, Isla reminded herself. Nothing more complicated than that. Outside, Cade continued working, and Isla found herself grateful for the steady, reassuring presence of someone who asked for nothing more than the right to take care of the place she was learning to call home. Chapter 5. The First Threat. Isla had been living at the lodge for a week when she learned that supernatural threats were more than theoretical possibilities. She was in the main lodge's kitchen, perfecting a recipe for wild mushroom risotto, testing whether she could forage ingredients for her restaurant's seasonal menu, when Cade's voice cut through the peaceful afternoon like a blade. Isla, get inside the safe room. Now, the command came from somewhere outside, carrying an authority that bypassed rational thought and went straight to survival instincts. Isla dropped her wooden spoon and moved toward the window, trying to see what had triggered Cade's alarm. Don't look outside. Cade's voice was closer now, just beyond the kitchen door. Go to the cellar room Vivian showed you in her journals. Stay there until I come for you. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs as she grabbed her phone and headed for the concealed door Vivian's journals had described, a hidden room beneath the lodge designed for emergency shelter. She'd thought it was just her great-aunt's paranoia about natural disasters, but now it felt like life-saving preparation. The cellar room was small but well-stocked with preserved food, water, and communication equipment that looked more sophisticated than anything Isla would have expected in an off-grid lodge. She huddled on the narrow cot, straining to hear what was happening above. The sounds that filtered through the floorboards were unlike anything from her normal human experience. Snarling that seemed too large and vicious for any natural animal. Crashes that suggested furniture being destroyed. And underneath it all, a low growling that vibrated through the building's bones and made Isla's skin crawl with primitive fear. Then suddenly, silence. Isla waited, counting her heartbeats and trying not to imagine the worst. Cade could be injured. He could be dead. She could be trapped in this hidden room while unknown predators prowled the lodge above. Isla, Cade's voice rough and strained but undeniably alive. It's safe to come up. She emerged from the cellar to find the main lodge in shambles. Furniture overturned, claw marks gouged in the timber walls, windows shattered and letting in cold mountain air. In the center of the destruction stood Cade, in human form but somehow different. Wilder, more dangerous, with silver eyes that still held traces of the wolf she'd seen him become. What happened? Isla asked, surveying the damage. Rogue werewolves, Cade said grimly, righting an overturned chair. 4 of them, testing our defenses and looking for weaknesses. Our defenses? Cade gestured toward markings carved into the door frames and window sills. Symbols Isla had noticed but assumed were decorative. Vivian warded this property with protective magic. It keeps most supernatural threats at bay, but rogues are desperate enough to push against barriers that would stop more rational creatures. Isla moved toward a window where claw marks had scored deep gouges in the wooden frame. They were trying to get inside. They were trying to get to you, Cade said bluntly. A human under pack protection is valuable leverage. If they could capture you, they could force me to negotiate from a position of weakness. The casual mention of kidnapping made Isla's knees weak. Leverage for what? Territory disputes. The rogues want to claim this area for their own hunting grounds, but they can't do that while the Thornwood pack maintains protection compacts. Cade moved to examine the damaged window, his expression grim. Taking you hostage would have forced me to choose between honoring my obligations to Vivian and protecting your safety. Isla sank into an undamaged chair, processing the implications. So I'm not just living on protected land. I'm a target because of the protection. Yes, Cade said simply. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you inherited this property. Isla looked around the destroyed lodge. Her sanctuary turned battleground. Her peaceful retreat revealed as something far more dangerous. How often does this happen? It's been quiet for the past 3 years, Cade said, beginning to collect broken glass. But word has spread that Vivian is gone and the compact is up for renewal. Groups that were afraid to challenge her are testing to see if her heir will maintain the same protections. And if I choose not to renew the compact? Cade paused in his cleaning, meeting her eyes with an expression that was carefully neutral. Then attacks like this become your problem to handle alone. The weight of that reality settled on Isla's shoulders like a heavy cloak. So my choices are to accept a supernatural protector I didn't ask for, or become a permanent target for creatures that want to use me as bait. That's an accurate summary, Cade said quietly. I know it's not fair. Isla stood up, moving toward the kitchen window where afternoon sunlight streamed through spiderweb glass. The rogues, are they gone for good? For now. But they'll be back with reinforcements once they report that the property is still actively defended. Cade's voice carried the weight of certainty. The next attack will be larger and more coordinated. When? Soon. They'll want to test our defenses again before the hunter's moon, while they still have time to plan a major assault if needed. Isla turned to face Cade, noting the way he held himself, alert, protective, ready for violence despite his calm exterior. You fought 4 of them alone. I had advantages, Cade said simply. This is my territory, and I know how to use Vivian's wards to amplify my abilities. But you could have been killed. Something flickered in Cade's silver eyes at her concern. The risk comes with the responsibility. Protecting this land and the people on it is what I swore to do. Even if those people include someone who might decide not to renew your compact? Cade's smile was gentle and slightly sad. Especially then. You didn't choose this situation, Isla. You deserve protection regardless of what you decide about the future. The selfless response made Isla's chest tight with emotion she didn't want to examine too closely. She'd spent 5 years with a man who wouldn't lift a finger to help her unless it served his own interests. Cade's willingness to risk his life for someone who might abandon him was almost incomprehensible. "I need some air," Isla said, moving toward the door. "Isla, wait." Cade's voice stopped her before she could step outside. "It's not safe for you to be alone right now. The rogues might have left sentries." "Then come with me," Isla said, surprising herself with the invitation. "I need to walk, and apparently I need a bodyguard." Cade nodded, grabbing a jacket from the hook by the door. "There's a trail behind the lodge that leads to a clearing where Vivian used to meditate. It's within the strongest ward boundaries." They walked in silence through towering pines and golden aspens, following a path that showed signs of careful maintenance. Isla found herself hyper-aware of Cade's presence beside her. The way he moved with predatory grace, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for threats, the way his very presence made her feel safer despite the danger they'd just faced. "Tell me about the rogues," Isla said as they reached the clearing Cade had mentioned. "What makes them different from your pack?" Cade settled on a fallen log that formed a natural bench, and Isla joined him, maintaining careful distance while appreciating the shared space. Pack wolves live by codes that prioritize community welfare and sustainable relationships with humans. Rogues are werewolves who've rejected those limitations in favor of taking whatever they want. So they're criminals? More like predators who've given up any pretense of civilization, Cade said. They hunt humans for sport, claim territory through violence, and see other supernatural beings as competitors to be eliminated. Isla shuddered, imagining what might have happened if Cade hadn't been there to defend the lodge. "How many of them are there?" "Too many," Cade said grimly. "When pack wolves are exiled for crimes against the community, they often band together in rogue groups. They're drawn to areas like this, remote, lightly populated, with resources they can exploit. And Vivian kept them away for 40 years? Vivian was formidable," Cade said with obvious admiration. "She had natural magical abilities that most humans never develop, and she wasn't afraid to use them against threats to her territory." Isla thought about her Grey Tant's journals, filled with matter-of-fact descriptions of supernatural encounters and diplomatic negotiations. "Do I have those abilities?" Cade studied her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Magic often runs in bloodlines, but it requires training and practice to develop. Vivian started learning when she was much younger than you are now. So I'm essentially defenseless." "You're under my protection," Cade said firmly, "and you're stronger than you realize. You've handled learning about the supernatural world with remarkable composure." "I've had a lot of practice dealing with situations that seem impossible," Isla said dryly, thinking about the months of divorce proceedings and Marcus's psychological manipulation. "Though I admit this is a new level of surreal." "What kind of practice?" Cade asked gently. Isla hesitated, then found herself answering with more honesty than she'd intended. "My ex-husband was very good at creating crises that only he could solve. I spent 5 years believing I was helpless without his guidance and protection." "But you left him eventually?" "After I caught him embezzling from our restaurant and realized that his protection was really just control." Isla pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I swore I'd never put myself in a position where someone else could make decisions about my safety again." Cade was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Is that why you're reluctant to renew the compact? Because it feels like accepting another form of control?" The perceptive question hit closer to home than Isla wanted to admit. "Partly. I came here for independence, for the right to make my own choices without having to consider someone else's needs and agendas. And now you're faced with a situation where your choices affect not just you, but an entire pack of wolves and potentially innocent humans in the surrounding area." "Exactly," Isla said, grateful that he understood the complexity of her position. "It's not fair to burden someone with that kind of responsibility without their consent." "No," Cade agreed. "It's not fair. But life rarely is, and sometimes the most important choices are the ones we never wanted to make." They sat in comfortable silence, watching shadows lengthen across the clearing as afternoon moved toward evening. Isla found herself studying Cade's profile, noting the way tension held his shoulders despite his calm exterior. "You're worried about the next attack," she observed. "I'm worried about a lot of things," Cade admitted. "The rogues, the compact renewal, whether you'll decide this life is too dangerous to accept. And if I do decide it's too dangerous?" Cade turned to meet her eyes, his expression serious but gentle. Then I'll help you sell the property to someone who can handle the supernatural obligations, and I'll make sure you're safely relocated somewhere the rogues can't find you." The offer was generous and selfless, and it made Islah's decision infinitely more complicated. "Even though that would leave you without sanctuary rights? Your safety matters more than my convenience," Cade said simply. Islah felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the careful walls she'd built around her heart. Cade's consistent prioritization of her well-being, his respect for her autonomy, his willingness to sacrifice his own needs for hers. It was everything Marcus had never been. "Cade," she said softly, "why does this compact matter so much to your pack? Surely there are other places you could claim sanctuary." Cade's expression grew distant with memory and old pain. "The Thornwood pack has been nearly destroyed twice in the past decade. We're the survivors of larger groups that were hunted down by rogues and supernatural extremists. This territory represents stability and safety we haven't had in years." "How many of you are there?" 9 adults, 5 children, Cade said quietly. "We're small, but we're family. Everyone who's left has earned their place through loyalty and sacrifice." The knowledge that her decision would affect 14 lives, including children, made Islah's throat tight with responsibility she'd never asked for. "Where are they now?" "Scattered across the region, staying with allied packs and supernatural communities until we know whether the compact will be renewed." Cade's voice carried the weight of leadership and love. "They're depending on me to secure their future." "No pressure," Islah said wryly. Cade's smile was rueful. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to manipulate you with emotional appeals. Your decision should be based on what's right for your life, not guilt about ours." The fact that he was actively trying not to manipulate her made Islah trust him more, not less. Marcus would have leveraged every possible advantage to get what he wanted, but Cade seemed genuinely committed to letting her choose freely. "The next attack," Islah said, returning to the more immediate concern. "How do we prepare for it?" "We." Cade's eyebrows rose. "This is my property, my responsibility now," Islah said firmly. "I may not have magical abilities or supernatural strength, but I'm not going to hide in the cellar while you risk your life to protect me." Something that looked like pride flickered in Cade's eyes. Vivian would have said exactly the same thing. "Then she and I finally have something in common," Islah said, standing up and brushing pine needles off her jeans. "Come on. Let's go figure out how to turn a recently divorced chef into someone who can help defend a supernatural sanctuary." As they walked back toward the lodge, Islah found herself feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. The desire to fight for something that mattered, alongside someone she was beginning to trust completely. The feeling terrified her almost as much as the rogues did. Chapter 6, Sharing Scars. 3 days after their conversation in the clearing, Islah woke to find Cade sitting on her front porch steps at dawn, staring at the forest with an expression of such profound weariness that it made her chest ache. She made 2 cups of coffee and joined him, settling on the step beside. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked finally. "Nightmares," Cade said simply, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. "They've been getting worse as the hunter's moon approaches." "What kind of nightmares?" Cade was quiet for so long that Islah thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. "I dream about losing everyone I'm supposed to protect. The pack, this territory you." The casual inclusion of herself in his list of protected people sent warmth through Islah's chest. "Have you always had prophetic dreams?" "Sometimes. Alpha wolves often have enhanced intuition about threats to their pack." Cade sipped his coffee, his silver eyes fixed on the treeline. "But these don't feel like warnings about external threats. They feel like fears about my own failures." Islah studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw and the careful way he held himself apart from her despite sitting close enough to touch. "What kind of failures?" "The kind where I'm not strong enough, fast enough, smart enough to keep everyone safe," Cade said quietly. "The kind where people I love die because I made the wrong choice." "Has that happened before?" Cade's hands tightened around his coffee mug. "Yes." The simple admission carried so much pain that Islah felt it like a physical blow. "Do you want to talk about it?" "I lost my mate 6 years ago," Cade said, his voice carefully controlled. "Elena. She was human, like you. I thought our bond would be enough to protect her from the dangers of my world." Islah's heart clenched at the raw grief in his voice. "What happened?" "Hunters," Cade said simply. "The kind that target supernatural beings specifically. They took her to force me into a trap, and by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. "Oh, Cade." Isla set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. "I'm so sorry. I was arrogant," Cade continued, his voice hollow with self-recrimination. "I believed that being alpha made me powerful enough to shield her from every threat. I didn't realize that loving me would make her a target for everyone who wanted to hurt me." The parallel to Isla's current situation wasn't lost on either of them. "Is that why you're having nightmares about the compact renewal?" "Partly." Cade finally met her eyes, and Isla saw fear there. Not of physical threat, but of emotional devastation. "I can't lose someone else I care about because of my failures. So you're pushing me away to protect me?" "I'm trying to be honest about the risks," Cade said. "Elena died because I didn't fully understand what I was exposing her to. I won't make that mistake again." Isla felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. "Cade, you can't blame yourself for what hunters did to someone you loved." "Can I?" Cade's laugh was bitter. "She was targeted specifically because she was my weakness. If I'd been stronger, smarter, more careful, she'd still be gone," Isla interrupted firmly. "Because you can't control other people's evil choices, no matter how strong or smart or careful you are." Cade stared at her, seeming startled by her vehement defense of him. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Isla said, surprising herself with the intensity of her response. "I spent 5 years blaming myself for Marcus's betrayals, thinking that if I'd been more supportive, more trusting, more everything, he wouldn't have stolen from me. But the truth is that Marcus's choices were about his character, not my inadequacies." "That's different." "No, it's not," Isla said firmly. "It's exactly the same. You're taking responsibility for someone else's deliberate cruelty, and you're letting that guilt convince you that you don't deserve love or happiness." Cade was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Elena used to say something similar. "Smart woman." "She was," Cade said softly. "She was also brave and kind and completely fearless about loving someone from a world she didn't understand." "Like me," Isla said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Cade turned to study her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Yes, like you." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications that made Isla's pulse quicken. "Cade, when you told me about the compact, you left something out." "What do you mean?" Isla took a deep breath, steeling herself for a conversation that would change everything between them. "You explained the magical connection, the protection aspects, the way it would affect my relationship with your pack. But you didn't mention that you've already recognized me as your mate." Cade went very still, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. "How did you?" "Vivian's journals," Isla said. "She wrote about the signs of mate recognition, the way alphas react to their destined partners. The way you've been looking at me, the protective instincts, the careful distance you maintain despite obvious attraction. It all fits." Cade set down his coffee and turned to face her fully, his expression carefully neutral. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth," Isla said. "I want you to admit that this compact renewal isn't just about pack protection or property rights. It's about you wanting to claim your mate, and me having to decide whether to accept that bond." The words hung in the morning air like a challenge. Cade looked at Isla with an expression that cycled through surprise, resignation, and something that looked like relief. "Yes," he said simply. "You're my mate. I knew at the moment I caught your scent when you arrived. Everything in me recognizes you as the person I'm meant to spend my life with. And you didn't think that was I thought it would terrify you into leaving immediately," Cade said honestly. "You came here to escape complicated relationships, and instead you found a werewolf who's supernaturally bonded to you before you even knew his name." Isla considered this, thinking about her reaction if Cade had led with the mate bond revelation instead of compact obligations. "You're probably right. I would have run. And now I'm terrified for different reasons," Isla admitted. "Not because you want to claim me, but because part of me wants to be claimed." Cade's expression shifted to something that looked like hope tempered by careful restraint. "What part?" "The part that's been lonely for longer than I care to admit," Isla said quietly. "The part that recognizes something in you that I've been searching for without knowing it. The part that feels safer and stronger when you're near." "Isla." Cade's voice was rough with emotion. "But I'm also terrified," Isla continued, "because accepting a mate bond feels like giving up the independence I just fought so hard to reclaim. And because you lost your last mate, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to risk that kind of love when it comes with that kind of danger. Cade reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady and completely non-demanding. The mate bond doesn't require you to give up your independence. If anything, it's designed to make both partners stronger by providing unconditional support and backup. And the danger? The danger will always exist, Cade said honestly. Being connected to me will make you a target for people who want to hurt me. But it will also give you access to pack protection, supernatural allies, and abilities you can't access alone. Isla looked down at their joined hands, noting how perfectly Cade's fingers fit with hers. What does the mate bond feel like? Not the compact for the territory, but the personal connection between us. Like coming home, Cade said simply. Like finding the other half of my soul. Like knowing that whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. And if I'm not ready for that level of connection, then we find a way to complete the compact renewal without the mate bond, Cade said immediately. There are alternative rituals that would give you the protection benefits without the personal connection. They're more complex and less stable, but they exist. The immediate offer to prioritize her comfort over his desires made Isla's chest tight with emotion. You do that. Accept a purely business relationship to keep your pack safe. I'd do anything to keep you safe, Cade said firmly. Including protecting you from me if that's what you need. Isla looked into Cade's silver eyes and saw absolute sincerity, along with love so deep and selfless that it took her breath away. This wasn't Marcus's manipulative demands for control disguised as affection. This was a man offering to sacrifice his own happiness to ensure hers. What if I want both? Isla asked softly. The compact renewal and the mate bond? Cade's breath caught. Are you saying? I'm saying I need to know what that would look like, Isla clarified quickly. I need to understand exactly what I'd be agreeing to before I make any final decisions. Cade nodded, though disappointment flickered across his features. The mate bond ritual happens during the hunter's moon, integrated with the compact renewal. It would permanently link our souls, our life forces, our magical energies. We would be able to sense each other's emotions, know when the other is in danger, share strength and healing abilities. That sounds intense. It is, Cade agreed. It's the deepest form of magical partnership that exists between supernatural beings and humans. Once complete, it can never be broken or transferred. So if I choose the mate bond, I'm choosing you forever. And I'm choosing you forever, Cade said. Not because magic compels it, but because you're exactly who I would choose if I could design my perfect partner. The declaration sent heat racing through Isla's veins. What makes you so sure? Cade's smile was soft and radiant. Because you're brave enough to face impossible situations with grace. Because you're strong enough to rebuild your life after devastating betrayal. Because you're kind enough to care for someone's wounds even when you're angry with them. Because you're stubborn enough to stand up for what you believe in, even when it would be easier to back down. He paused, his thumb tracing patterns across her knuckles. Because you make me want to be worthy of your trust. Because you challenge me to be better while accepting who I am right now. Because you're beautiful and brilliant and absolutely fearless when it matters. Isla felt tears threatening at the heartfelt catalog of her strengths. Qualities she'd forgotten she possessed during her marriage to someone who'd focused only on her perceived weaknesses. I need time to think, Isla said, though she was already leaning toward Cade, drawn by his warmth and sincerity. You have time, Cade said, raising her hand to his lips for a soft kiss that sent electricity racing up her arm. But Isla, whatever you decide about the bonds, please know that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. As they sat together on the porch steps, watching the sun rise over the mountains that might become their permanent home, Isla felt something shifting in her heart. The careful walls she'd built were developing cracks, letting in light and hope and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone worth risking everything for. The hunter's moon was 3 weeks away. Somehow that felt like both forever and not nearly long enough. Chapter 7. The Siege Begins. Isla woke on the morning of the hunter's moon to the sound of vehicles arriving at the lodge. Through her bedroom window, she could see trucks and SUVs parked in her driveway, and people moving through her yard with the confidence of those who belonged there. For a moment, panic flared. Another attack. A final assault before the compact deadline. Then she spotted Cade among the crowd, embracing a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and the same storm-gray eyes, and Isla realized these were Cade's pack. She dressed quickly and made her way outside, noting how the assembled wolves deferred to Cade while maintaining a casual family dynamic that spoke of deep bonds and shared history. Children played near the vehicles while adults unloaded supplies, and everyone moved with the fluid efficiency of people accustomed to rapid relocations. "Isla," Cade called, moving toward her with obvious relief. "I should have warned you they were coming, but we received word late last night about increased rogue activity. It wasn't safe for them to stay scattered anymore." The woman Cade had been embracing approached, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Diana Thornwood, Cade's second-in-command and the closest thing he has to a mother. Thank you for considering renewal of our compact. It means more than you know." "It's nice to meet you," Isla said, accepting the handshake while trying to process the sudden arrival of 14 people she was supposedly responsible for protecting. "Though I should mention that I haven't made a final decision yet." "Of course," Diana said graciously. Cade explained that you need to consider all options carefully. "We're simply grateful you've allowed us to shelter here while the decision is pending." As Diana moved away to help organize the arriving pack members, Isla found herself studying the faces around her. The wolves looked like any extended family, diverse in age and appearance, united by affection and shared purpose rather than blood relations. Several children clustered around a teenage girl who was clearly their favorite babysitter, while older adults set up camping equipment with practiced ease. "They're beautiful," Isla said to Cade, watching a toddler with Cade's silver eyes try to catch butterflies. "They're everything to me," Cade replied simply. "My family, my responsibility, my reason for fighting so hard to secure this territory." A young man approached, tall and lean with the same predatory grace as Cade, but lacking his careful control. "Alpha, the rogues were spotted again this morning. Garrett's group has grown to at least 30, and they're moving this way." Cade's expression darkened. "How close?" "Close enough that we could smell them from the border markers," the young man said. "They're not trying to hide their presence anymore." "Garrett?" Isla asked. "The rogue Alpha who's been coordinating attacks on our territory," Cade explained grimly. "He's building a coalition of displaced wolves who want to claim this area for their own hunting grounds." Diana rejoined them, her expression grim. "It's worse than we thought, Cade. Garrett has been promising the rogues unrestricted hunting rights in human communities once he claims this territory. We're not just dealing with land disputes anymore. We're dealing with plans for systematic predation." Isla felt ice in her veins at the casual mention of hunting humans. How many people would be in danger? 2 small towns within a 30-mile radius, Diana said. Plus isolated farms, hiking trails, camping areas. Hundreds of potential victims who have no idea supernatural predators exist. The weight of responsibility crashed over Isla like a physical blow. Her decision wasn't just about accepting or rejecting a supernatural bond. It was about protecting innocent people from becoming prey for creatures they couldn't fight or even comprehend. "What happens if the compact isn't renewed?" Isla asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Garrett's coalition gains legitimacy," Cade said grimly. "Without established pack protection, they can claim this territory through right of conquest. Once they're established here, other rogue groups will see it as permission to take human hunting grounds throughout the region. And if the compact is renewed, then this territory remains under Thornwood pack protection, and Garrett's coalition has no legal supernatural claim to it," Diana explained. "They'd have to find somewhere else to establish themselves, or face consequences from the Council of Alphas for violating established compacts." Isla looked around at the pack members setting up what was clearly a defensive camp, preparing for a battle she'd never wanted to be part of. "So my choice is to accept magical bonding with Cade, or allow mass predation of innocent humans." "I know it's not fair," Cade began. "It's not about fair," Isla interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. "It's about impossible choices with consequences I never agreed to take responsibility for." Before Cade could respond, the sound of approaching engines cut through the morning air. But these weren't vehicles, they were motorcycles and ATVs, rumbling through the forest like mechanical predators. The pack immediately shifted into defensive positions, children moving toward the center while adults formed protective barriers. "They're coming," the young man who'd reported the sighting said urgently. "Garrett is done waiting for the hunter's moon." Cade moved to Isla's side, his body positioned to shield her from whatever emerged from the forest. "Get inside the lodge. The wards will protect you there." "No," Isla said firmly. This is my property, my decision. I'm not hiding while other people fight my battles. Isla, you don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me quickly, Isla said, moving toward the lodge. Not to hide, but to retrieve Vivian's emergency supplies. Because those engines are getting closer, and I refuse to be useless. Cade followed her, grabbing weapons and defensive items from Vivian's hidden cache. Garrett is going to demand that you refuse the compact renewal and turn the property over to his coalition. If you agree, his wolves will occupy this territory and begin hunting humans immediately. And if I refuse? He'll try to kill me to eliminate the compact option entirely, and then kill me to eliminate pack protection, and probably kill anyone else who might interfere with his plans. Isla finished. Yes, Isla strapped on the protective vest Vivian had somehow acquired, noting how it seemed designed specifically for supernatural combat. So our choices are surrender to mass murder, or fight a battle against overwhelming odds. Unless, Cade said quietly, checking the silver-lined weapons that would be effective against werewolves, you choose the third option. Which is? Cade met her eyes, his expression heartbroken but determined. Renew the compact and accept the mate bond tonight during the Hunter's Moon. The ceremony would give us access to magical protections and power levels that could even the odds against Garrett's coalition. Isla felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. So I have to choose between sacrificing innocent lives or sacrificing my independence and binding myself permanently to you. I'm sorry, Cade said, his voice rough with guilt. I never wanted to put you in this position. It's not your fault, Isla said, surprising herself with the certainty. Garrett created the situation, not you. And Vivian created the compact system that makes me responsible for it. You could still leave, Cade said desperately. I could help you disappear before Garrett arrives. You don't have to be the one to make these choices. Isla looked through the window at the pack members preparing to defend territory that might not even belong to them after tonight. Children who trusted the adults to keep them safe. Mothers and fathers willing to die to protect innocent humans they'd never met. Yes, I do, Isla said quietly. Because if I run away, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that people died because I was too scared to take responsibility for the power I inherited. The sound of motorcycles was deafeningly close now, and through the trees, Isla could see shapes moving that were too large and too fluid to be entirely human. Garrett's coalition had arrived. Isla, Cade said urgently, moving toward the door. Whatever happens out there, I need you to know. Save it, Isla interrupted, checking the silver dagger Vivian had included in her defensive kit. Tell me after we survive this. As they stepped onto the porch together, Isla saw the clearing fill with motorcycles and ATVs and their riders. Rogues in human form, but barely contained violence radiating from every line of their bodies. At their head was a man who could only be Garrett. Tall, powerfully built, with the kind of cruel handsomeness that probably made him attractive right up until he started killing people. Cade Thornwood, Garrett called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Still playing guardian to humans, I see. Garrett, Cade replied evenly, moving down the porch steps with alpha authority. Still compensating for inadequacy through violence and intimidation. Garrett laughed, the sound echoing off the mountains like breaking glass. Clever. But cleverness won't save you today. I'm here to claim this territory for wolves who understand that humans are prey, not partners. This territory is under compact protection, Cade said firmly. You have no legal claim here. Compact protection that expires at sunset, Garrett pointed out. And unless I'm mistaken, your little human hasn't agreed to renewal terms, which means this land becomes available for conquest. All eyes turned to Isla, and she felt the weight of dozens of supernatural gazes measuring her resolve. The compact hasn't expired yet, she said, her voice carrying more confidence than she felt. And the terms of renewal are between me and the Thornwood pack. Garrett studied her with obvious amusement. The brave little human thinks she has power here. How refreshing. His expression shifted to something darker. Let me make this simple for you, sweetheart. Refuse the compact renewal. Sign ownership of this property over to me, and I'll let you and Cade's pathetic pack walk away alive. And if I refuse? Garrett's smile was all teeth and malice. Then everyone here dies, starting with the children, and working our way up to you and your would-be mate. And I claim the territory anyway through right of conquest. Isla felt Cade's tension spike beside her, his protective instincts warring with the knowledge that fighting would likely get everyone killed. Around the clearing, the Thornwood pack maintained defensive positions, but they were outnumbered more than 2-1. "You have until sunset to decide," Garrett continued. "Think carefully, little human. How many lives is your independence worth?" As Garrett and his coalition withdrew to the forest's edge to wait, Isla felt the impossible weight of choice settling on her shoulders. Whatever decision she made in the next few hours would determine not just her own future, but the survival of everyone she'd come to care about. The hunter's moon was 8 hours away. Somehow that felt like both forever and not nearly enough time to figure out how to save everyone she'd accidentally learned to love. Chapter 8. Claiming Each Other. As sunset approached and the hunter's moon began to rise over the mountains, Isla found herself in Vivian's study, staring at the ritual documents Cade had shown her weeks ago. The formal language describing bond ceremonies and magical contracts felt surreal against the backdrop of armed rogues surrounding her property, waiting for her decision. A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called. Cade entered carrying 2 cups of tea and looking like a man preparing for either the best or worst night of his life. "Diana thought you might need some chamomile. It helps with pre-ritual nerves." "Is that what this is?" Isla asked, accepting the warm cup gratefully. "Pre-ritual nerves?" "Among other things," Cade said, settling in the chair across from her. "How are you feeling?" Isla considered the question seriously. Terrified, angry, overwhelmed, strangely calm. She met his eyes. Ready. Ready for what? To stop being afraid of making the wrong choice and start focusing on making the right one, Isla said firmly. "Cade, I want to complete the mate bond tonight." Cade went very still, his teacup frozen halfway to his lips. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone," Isla said, setting down her tea and moving to kneel in front of his chair. "I'm sure that you're the most honorable man I've ever known, and that you'd spend the rest of your life trying to make me happy if I gave you the chance." "Isla, I'm sure that I want to fight for this pack, for those children, for the innocent people Garrett wants to hunt," Isla continued, reaching for Cade's hands. "And I'm sure that I want to do it with you as my partner, my mate, my equal in every way that matters." Cade set down his tea and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing across her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "Are you choosing the bond because you want it, or because you feel obligated to save everyone?" The question was fair and necessary, and Isla appreciated that he was still trying to protect her autonomy, even when accepting her choice would give him everything he wanted. "Both," Isla said honestly. "I'm choosing it because I've fallen in love with you, and because completing the bond is the right thing to do for everyone depending on us." "You love me." Cade's voice was rough with wonder. "I love your strength and your gentleness," Isla said, letting herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never risked before. "I love your protective instincts and your respect for my independence. I love the way you care for your pack like family, and the way you've never once tried to manipulate me into making decisions that serve your interests." "I love you too," Cade said softly, "completely, desperately, with everything I am." "Then let's do this," Isla said, standing up and pulling Cade with her. "Let's claim each other properly." The mate bond ritual required them to travel to a sacred grove deep in the forest, where ancient standing stones created a natural circle under the rising hunter's moon. The Thornwood pack formed a protective perimeter while Cade and Isla prepared for the ceremony that would bind their souls permanently. "The ritual is both simple and complex," Cade explained as they stood at the center of the stone circle. "We exchange vows of commitment, share blood to create magical connection, and allow the mate bond to complete itself under the moon's power." "What will it feel like when the bond forms?" "Like coming home," Cade said, echoing his earlier description. "Like finding the missing piece of yourself. Like knowing that whatever comes next, you'll never face it alone." Isla felt moondrunk already, intoxicated by the supernatural energy radiating from the ancient stones and the man standing beside her. "I'm ready." Cade drew a silver knife blessed for ritual purposes, making a small cut on his palm before offering the blade to Isla. "Blood of my blood," he said formally. Isla made a matching cut, watching her blood well bright red in the moonlight. "Blood of my blood," she repeated. When they pressed their palms together, the world exploded into silver and gold light. The mate bond formed like lightning, instant, overwhelming, permanent. Isla felt Cade's consciousness merge with hers, his emotions and thoughts becoming part of her own internal landscape. But instead of feeling invaded or diminished, she felt expanded, strengthened, completed in ways she'd never imagined possible. Through the bond, she could feel Cade's love for her, vast and deep and absolutely unwavering. She could sense his protective instincts, his alpha authority, his fierce commitment to her well-being and happiness. But she could also feel him experiencing her own emotions, her determination, her growing love for his pack family, her excitement about the future they would build together. The compact bond, Cade said, his voice rough with the power flowing between them. While the moon is at its peak. The formal renewal of Vivian's protection compact felt almost anticlimactic after the intensity of the mate bond. But Isla spoke the ancient words with full understanding of their weight. She was binding herself not just to Cade, but to the responsibility of protecting innocent lives and maintaining the balance between supernatural and human worlds. When the final ritual words were spoken, power blazed through the stone circle with enough force to send nearby trees swaying. Isla felt magic settling into her bones. Not enough to make her supernatural, but enough to let her access abilities she'd never dreamed of having. "It's done," Cade said, pulling her into his arms. "You're mine and I'm yours for as long as we both live." "Forever," Isla corrected, feeling the truth of it through their bond. The mate connection doesn't end with death. Cade's kiss was soft and fierce and full of promises about the life they were going to build together. When they broke apart, both were glowing with the silver and gold light that marked completed mate bonds. "Now we go save everyone," Isla said practically. Cade's grin was all wolf, sharp and satisfied and absolutely confident. "Now we show Garrett what happens when someone threatens our family." As they walked back toward the lodge where rogue wolves waited for her decision, Isla felt power humming through her veins and Cade's strength supporting her own. She was no longer a recently divorced chef hiding from complicated relationships. She was Luna of the Thornwood Pack, mate to an alpha who would die before letting anyone hurt her, and guardian of a territory that would remain safe as long as she drew breath. Through their bond, she could feel Cade's pride and love, but also his strategic mind already planning their defense. The mate bond had amplified both their abilities, Isla's natural magical heritage awakening fully, and Cade's alpha power strengthening with the support of his bonded mate. "They can feel it," Cade said as they approached the clearing. "The rogues. They can sense that the compact has been renewed and the mate bond completed. Some of them are already getting nervous." "Good," Isla said, her voice carrying an authority she'd never possessed before. "They should be." When they emerged from the forest path into the clearing, every eye turned toward them. The silver and gold aura surrounding them was visible even to human eyes, a clear declaration that they were bonded and empowered. Garrett's expression shifted from smug confidence to fury, so pure it seemed to distort the air around him. "You foolish little human," he snarled, his form already beginning to shift toward Wolf. "You have no idea what you've just committed yourself to." "I know exactly what I've committed myself to," Isla replied, surprised by the steady power in her own voice. The mate bond was amplifying her confidence, feeding her Cade's alpha presence, while strengthening her own natural leadership abilities. "I've committed myself to protecting innocent lives from predators like you." Around the clearing, Garrett's rogues began their own transformations, bones cracking and fur sprouting as they prepared for the battle they'd been anticipating all day. But the Thornwood Pack was ready too, forming defensive positions that would protect the children while maximizing their fighting effectiveness. "You think bonding with a failed alpha makes you powerful?" Garrett laughed, his voice distorting as his jaw elongated into a muzzle. "You're still just a weak human playing with forces beyond your comprehension. Then you don't understand mate bonds very well," Isla said calmly, feeling Cade's strength flowing through their connection. But more than that, she could feel something else. Power that was uniquely hers, inherited from Vivian's bloodline and awakened by the compact renewal. "And you definitely don't understand what happens when you threaten someone's family." The first wave of attacks came from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the Thornwood Pack's defenses. But what Garrett hadn't anticipated was how the completed mate bond would affect the battle dynamics. Cade fought with supernatural grace and power, but he was supported by Isla's strategic thinking and enhanced by her newfound magical abilities. Through their bond, they moved as one, anticipating each other's actions, covering defensive gaps, striking with perfect coordination. Isla found herself moving with fluid precision she'd never possessed, dodging attacks and striking back with silver weapons that seemed to find their targets with unerring accuracy. The magic Vivian had passed down through bloodlines awakened fully in her, responding to her will and the desperate need to protect those she loved. The children, Diana called out as a group of rogues broke through their perimeter. They're targeting the children. Rage blazed through Isla's consciousness. Not just her own protective fury, but Cade's alpha instincts amplified through their bond. She turned toward the rogues advancing on the pack's youngest members and felt power surge through her like lightning. "No," Isla said, her voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural force. "You will not touch them." The words weren't just a statement. They were a command backed by magical authority inherited from generations of Winter's women who'd protected this territory. Silver light erupted from Isla's hands, creating barriers between the rogues and their intended victims. The protective magic was instinctive, drawing on Vivian's journals and the awakened power flowing through her veins. Garrett roared with fury, abandoning his attack on Cade to charge directly at Isla. "Kill the human. Break the bond." But Cade was there instantly, intercepting Garrett with enough force to send both wolves tumbling across the clearing. The two alphas fought with deadly precision, supernatural strength and speed turning their battle into something beyond human comprehension. Isla tried to help, but found herself surrounded by three rogues who'd apparently decided that eliminating the Luna was their key to victory. Her silver weapons flashed as she defended herself, muscle memory from self-defense classes combining with enhanced reflexes from the mate bond and newly awakened magical instincts. "You should have stayed in your human city," one of the rogues snarled, raking claws across her arm. "Supernatural politics aren't for soft little prey animals." "Good thing I'm not prey," Isla replied, driving her silver dagger into his shoulder while simultaneously releasing a burst of protective magic that sent him flying backward. "I'm the predator you should have been afraid of." The rogue's scream of pain as silver burned through his supernatural system gave Isla grim satisfaction. Through her bond with Cade, she could feel his approval and pride, even as he continued his deadly dance with Garrett. But the battle was taking its toll. The Thornwood pack was holding their own, but barely. Several pack members were injured, and the rogues kept coming in waves that seemed designed to exhaust their defenders rather than win quickly. "They're trying to wear us down," Diana called out during a brief lull in the fighting. "Force us to make mistakes from exhaustion. Then we end this now," Isla said, looking toward where Cade and Garrett were still locked in combat. Through their bond, she could feel Cade's fatigue, the way silver claws had left wounds that were healing slower than usual. She reached through their connection, sending him strength and healing energy, feeling the mate bond amplify her intentions. Cade's eyes flashed brighter as he felt her support, his movements becoming faster and more precise. The bond between them wasn't just emotional. It was tactical, magical, a partnership that made them both stronger than they could ever be alone. But they needed to finish this before more pack members were seriously injured. Isla thought about Vivian's journals, about the protections built into this property over generations of Winter's women. The ward stones. If she could activate the master ward, it would force all hostile supernatural beings off the property. "Cover me," Isla called to Diana, already moving toward the central ward stone hidden behind the lodge. The remaining Thornwood pack members formed a protective escort as Isla made her way to the master ward, an ancient stone carved with symbols that predated written language. She pressed her hands to the carved surface and felt Vivian's magic responding to her bloodline, but it wasn't enough. The ward needed more power than she possessed alone. Through the mate bond, Isla reached for Cade's alpha authority, pulling his supernatural strength through their connection while adding her own awakened magical heritage. The ward stone began to glow, silver light spreading outward in concentric circles that encompassed the entire property. "What is she doing?" Garrett roared, abandoning his fight with Cade to charge toward Isla. But the expanding ward caught him before he could reach her. The protective magic recognized his hostile intent and rejected his presence with explosive force. Garrett and his surviving rogues were literally thrown from the property, hurled beyond the boundary markers with enough violence to ensure they wouldn't be returning soon. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. Isla collapsed beside the ward stone, drained by the magical effort but triumphant. Through their bond, She could feel Cade's amazement and pride, along with the pack's collective relief and gratitude. "Is everyone okay?" she called weakly. "Minor injuries only," Diana reported, helping Isla to her feet. "Thanks to you, Luna." The title sent warmth through Isla's chest. She was Luna now, not just Cade's mate, but the magical guardian of this territory and the protector of everyone who called it home. Cade reached them, shifting back to human form and immediately checking Isla for injuries. "That was incredibly dangerous," he said, but his voice carried admiration rather than criticism. "And absolutely magnificent." "Did it work?" Isla asked, leaning into his embrace. "Are they really gone?" "The ward will keep them out for now," Cade confirmed. "But Garrett won't give up easily. He'll find another way to challenge our claim to this territory. Then we'll be ready for him," Isla said firmly. Together, as the Thornwood pack began tending wounds and securing the property, Isla felt something settle into place in her chest. This was her life now, protecting innocent people from supernatural threats, leading a pack of wolves who'd become her chosen family, building a future with a man who loved her exactly as she was. It wasn't the quiet, simple life she'd thought she wanted when she'd inherited Vivian's lodge. It was infinitely more complicated, more dangerous, and more rewarding than anything she'd ever imagined. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Chapter 9. Building Our Future. 3 days after the battle, when the pack's injuries had healed and their defenses had been reinforced, Isla found herself standing in what had once been Vivian's meditation room, now transformed into a war room covered with maps and strategic plans. "Garrett has been spotted near Silverstone," Diana reported, pointing to a location 40 miles east. "He's recruiting again, reaching out to rogue packs as far as Wyoming and Montana." Cade studied the map, his jaw tight with tension Isla could feel through their bond. He's not giving up. If anything, being expelled from the territory has made him more determined. "Then we need to be smarter, not just stronger," Isla said, moving to stand beside him. Through their mate bond, she sent him calm reassurance, feeling his tension ease slightly in response. "Garrett's counting on us being reactive. What if we go on the offensive?" Diana's eyebrows rose. "What did you have in mind, Luna?" The title still sent a thrill through Isla, though she was getting more comfortable with it. Vivian's journals mentioned the Council of Alphas, the governing body for supernatural law enforcement. What if we formally report Garrett's plans for systematic human predation? Make this about more than just territorial disputes. Cade turned to look at her with an expression of dawning realization. "You want to turn this into a council matter. Force Garrett to answer for crimes against supernatural law, not just pack conflicts." "Exactly." Vivian documented 40 years of supernatural activity in this region, including evidence of Garrett's violations. "If we can prove he's planning to expose the supernatural world through mass predation, the council has to intervene." Diana smiled, slow and impressed. "That's brilliant. Garrett has been operating in gray areas for years, but planning systematic attacks on human populations crosses every line of supernatural law. How long would it take to compile the evidence?" Cade asked, already reaching for Vivian's archived journals. "A few days, maybe," Isla said. "But we'd need testimony from other packs who've been affected by Garrett's activities. Are there allies who would speak against him?" "Several," Diana said. "The Riverdale pack lost 3 members to Garrett's rogues 2 years ago. The Mountain Crest pack has been dealing with his territorial incursions for months. They'd jump at the chance to see him face council justice." Through their bond, Isla felt Cade's pride and love warming her from the inside out. "You've been Luna for 3 days, and you're already thinking like a seasoned leader," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I have good teachers," Isla replied, gesturing at Diana, "and a mate who makes me braver than I have any right to be." "The bond works both ways," Cade said softly, his forehead resting against hers. "You make me better too." Diana cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'll start reaching out to allied packs for testimony. You two should probably get some rest before the council representatives arrive next week." As Diana left the war room, Isla found herself alone with Cade for the first time since the bonding ceremony. The mate bond hummed between them, a constant awareness of each other's presence and emotions that had become as natural as breathing. "How are you really feeling?" Cade asked, his hands moving to massage her shoulders. "I can sense you're tired, but there's something else." Isla leaned into his touch, marveling at how well he could read her through their connection. "Overwhelmed, I think. A month ago, I was a divorced chef trying to escape her problems. Now I'm Luna of a werewolf pack, wielding inherited magic, and preparing to testify before a supernatural council. It's a lot. Too much. Cade's voice carried concern. No, Isla said, turning to face him. It's exactly right. That's what overwhelms me. How perfectly this all fits, like Vivian knew exactly what I needed even when I didn't. Cade cupped her face in his hands, his silver eyes searching hers. She knew you were stronger than you believed. She saw the leader you could become if given the right circumstances. Or maybe she saw that I needed a reason to be strong, Isla said. Something worth fighting for beyond just myself. And do you have that now? Cade asked softly. Instead of answering with words, Isla pulled him down for a kiss that communicated everything she was still learning to express. Her love, her commitment, her absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily, and Isla could feel Cade's desire through their bond, matched by her own. We should probably, Cade began. Yes, we should, Isla agreed, taking his hand and leading him toward the stairs to her bedroom. Their bedroom now, though they'd been too busy with pack business to properly move Cade's belongings from the guest cottage. The next morning, Isla woke wrapped in Cade's arms, feeling more content than she'd ever been in her life. Through their bond, she could sense he was awake too, just enjoying the peaceful moment before the day's responsibilities claimed them. I can hear you thinking, Cade murmured against her hair. I'm thinking about how to explain all this to my restaurant staff, Isla admitted. I've been gone for a month with minimal communication. They're probably ready to stage a mutiny. You could tell them the truth, Cade suggested, that you inherited property and are establishing a new location. Isla turned in his arms to face him. A new location? You're an incredible chef, Isla. Why not bring that talent here? The pack needs sustainable income sources, and there are enough tourists and locals in the area to support a restaurant. The idea took root in Isla's mind, possibilities blooming faster than she could catalog them. A farm-to-table concept using local ingredients. I could forage mushrooms, wild herbs, collaborate with pack members who know the land. The old barn on the eastern edge of the property could be converted, Cade said, his enthusiasm matching hers through their bond. It has the right structure and location. Close enough to the main road for accessibility, far enough from pack living areas for privacy. Isla sat up, her mind already racing with plans. I'd need to hire staff, establish relationships with local suppliers, design a menu that honors the region. And the pack would help with construction and setup, Cade added. Several members have carpentry and electrical experience. Diana used to be a project manager before she joined the pack. Through their bond, Isla could feel Cade's genuine excitement about helping her build something that was hers. Not just as Luna, but as the chef and businesswoman she'd been before inheriting this new life. You really think it could work? I think you could make anything work, Cade said, pulling her back down into his arms. But yes, I think a restaurant would be perfect. It gives you a creative outlet, provides pack income, and establishes legitimate reasons for people to visit the territory without exposing our supernatural nature. A knock on the door interrupted their planning session. Alpha Luna, Diana's voice called. We have visitors. Council representatives arrived early. Isla and Cade exchanged looks, their peaceful morning instantly shifting to leadership mode. We'll be right down, Cade called. 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in what Isla hoped were appropriately authoritative clothes, they met the council representatives in the lodge's main room. 3 alphas stood waiting. 2 men and 1 woman, all radiating the kind of power that made Isla's inherited magic instinctively rise in response. Alpha Thornwood, the woman said, extending her hand to Cade. I'm Council Alpha Magdalene Cross. These are Council Alphas James Rivera and Thomas Chin. We've come to assess the situation with the Rogue Coalition. Thank you for coming so quickly, Cade said, then gestured to Isla. This is my mate and Luna of the Thornwood Pack, Isla Winters. She's the one who formally requested council intervention. Magdalene's sharp green eyes assessed Isla with obvious interest. A human Luna. That's rare in our modern age. Isla is also the heir to Vivian Winters's bloodline magic, Cade added. She successfully activated the Master Ward system to repel Garrett's coalition. Impressive, James Rivera said, his tone making it unclear whether he meant it as a compliment or concern, though it raises questions about how much power a human Luna should wield in supernatural matters. Isla felt her hackles rise at the implicit challenge, but Cade's calm presence through their bond steadied her. With respect, Counsel Alpha Rivera, I didn't ask for this power or this responsibility. But innocent people, both human and supernatural, are in danger because of Garrett's actions. I'm using the tools I've inherited to protect them, which I believe is exactly what the compact system was designed to enable. Magdalene smiled, a sharp expression that suggested approval. Well said. Perhaps we should review your evidence before making judgments about appropriate power usage. For the next 3 hours, Isla and Diana presented their case. Decades of Vivian's meticulous documentation, testimony from allied pacts, and evidence of Garrett's systematic violations of supernatural law. By the time they finished, even Thomas Chun, who'd been openly skeptical at the start, looked convinced. This is more extensive than we realized, Magdalene admitted. Garrett has been operating with impunity for years, and our failure to investigate earlier has enabled his escalation. What happens now? Isla asked. Now we issue a formal summons for Garrett to appear before the council, James said. He'll be given the opportunity to refute these charges. If he refuses to appear or if the evidence holds, he'll be declared rogue and subject to immediate pack justice. Which means? Cade asked. Which means any pack alpha has the legal right to eliminate him without facing consequences, Magdalene explained. It's the council's way of dealing with threats we can't contain through conventional means. Through their bond, Isla felt Cade's grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about defending their territory anymore. It was about ensuring Garrett could never threaten innocent people again. There's one more thing, Thomas said, his gaze settling on Isla. The council would like to offer you a position. A position? Isla repeated, surprised. Regional Liaison for Human Supernatural Relations, Magdalene clarified. Your unique position as a human Luna with awakened bloodline magic makes you ideal for bridging communities. We've been trying to establish better integration protocols for years, but we need someone who understands both worlds. Isla looked at Cade, feeling his support and pride through their bond, but also his determination to let her make this choice independently. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Magdalene said. But consider this. You've already been doing the work. This would just formalize your authority and give you resources to do it more effectively. After the council representatives left, Isla found herself back in the meditation room, now war room, staring at maps of the region and thinking about the future taking shape around her. Cade found her there an hour later, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Overwhelming day? He asked, offering her a glass. Overwhelming month, Isla corrected, accepting the wine gratefully. But in the best possible way. The council position? Cade asked. I think I want to do it, Isla admitted. Is that crazy? I'm still learning how to be Luna, and now I'm considering taking on regional responsibilities. I think you're exactly what both roles need, Cade said, settling beside her. Someone who sees possibilities instead of just problems. Someone who builds bridges instead of walls. Through their bond, Isla felt his absolute confidence in her, his love and support, his pride in watching her grow into her power. But she also felt something else, the mate bond itself activating in ways it hadn't during their previous battles. Cade's strength flowing into her not just emotionally, but physically. His tactical experience becoming her instincts. His alpha authority amplifying her magical bloodline. They weren't just bonded. They were becoming a true partnership in the supernatural sense. 2 halves of a whole, stronger together than the sum of their parts. Isla's magic exploded outward with renewed force, this time perfectly controlled. She didn't just create barriers. She created a cage of silver light around Garrett, trapping him mid-lunge. You made a mistake, Isla said, her voice carrying both her own authority and Cade's alpha power. You assumed I was fighting alone. Cade burst into the clearing in his wolf form, larger and more powerful than Isla had ever seen him, with Diana and a dozen pack members at his flanks. The remaining rogues fled immediately, recognizing the battle was lost. But Garrett, trapped in Isla's magical cage, could only watch as his carefully planned attack collapsed around him. Cade shifted back to human form, moving to Isla's side. His hands were gentle as he examined her wounded shoulder. But through their bond, she felt his lethal fury at Garrett. The council gave you a chance to surrender peacefully, Cade said, his voice carrying the weight of alpha judgment. You chose violence instead. That makes this justice, not murder. You can't kill me, Garrett snarled. I'm an alpha. Council law requires a formal trial. Council law allows any pack alpha to eliminate a declared rogue. Isla interrupted, pulling a document from her jacket pocket, somehow still intact despite the fight. As of this morning, based on your failure to appear for summons and continued attacks on protected territories, you were officially declared rogue. She handed the document to Cade, though they both already knew what it said. Magdalene Cross had delivered it personally, along with the council's grim acknowledgement that Garrett had forced their hand. This is your territory, Isla said to Cade through their bond and aloud. Your pack, your justice to deliver. But Cade shook his head, his love and respect for her flowing clearly through their connection. This is our territory. Our pack. The decision should be ours together. Through their bond, they communicated in the space of heartbeats, weighing justice against mercy, protection against vengeance, the needs of their pack against the weight of taking a life. He'll never stop, Isla said finally. As long as he lives, he'll keep recruiting rogues, keep threatening innocent people, keep trying to take what we're building here. I know, Cade said softly. They turned to Garrett together, united in purpose and authority. You have a choice, Isla said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. Accept permanent exile. The council will ensure you're monitored and contained. Or continue to fight and face the consequences. Garrett's laugh was bitter. Exile? Monitored like a criminal? I'd rather die than live as a neutered pet for the council. That can be arranged, Cade said grimly. But before either of them could act, Diana stepped forward. Alpha Luna, there's a third option. She gestured to the pack members surrounding them, wolves and humans alike watching the confrontation with fierce attention. Let the pack decide. Garrett's crimes affected all of us. We all deserve a voice in his fate. Isla looked at the faces around her. Emma, still shaking from the attack but standing tall. The children, now safe behind protective barriers but old enough to understand what was happening. The adult pack members who'd fought and bled to defend their home. That's fair, she said. One by one, the pack members spoke, some calling for exile, others for permanent elimination, all agreeing that Garrett could never be allowed to threaten them again. In the end, the decision was nearly unanimous. Permanent exile under council supervision, with the understanding that any violation would result in immediate execution. The council will contain you, Cade told Garrett as Diana secured him with silver-reinforced restraints. You'll live, but you'll never be free. And you'll spend the rest of your days knowing that you lost everything to a human Luna you underestimated. As pack members escorted Garrett away to await council transport, Isla finally allowed herself to collapse against Cade, her adrenaline fading and the pain from her shoulder wound demanding attention. That was insane, she said into his chest. That was magnificent, Cade corrected, his arms gentle around her. You saved the children, captured Garrett, and demonstrated exactly why you're Luna. I had help, Isla said, feeling his strength and love through their bond. I'll always have help. Forever, Cade agreed. As they walked back toward the lodge, now their permanent home, truly safe for the first time, Isla felt the weight of leadership settling more comfortably on her shoulders. She'd inherited a lodge and found a destiny. She'd run from love and discovered a mate. She'd sought solitude and built a family. And somewhere in the mountains that had witnessed her transformation, Vivian's spirit was probably smiling. The hardest part was over. Now came the beautiful challenge of building the life they'd fought so hard to protect. Chapter 11. Healing and Building. 2 weeks after Garrett's capture, Isla stood in the rebuilt guest cottage, now transformed into a cozy home for Emma and 2 other young pack members who'd requested their own space. The explosion damage had been extensive, but the pack had rallied together, and the new structure was even better than the original. It's perfect, Emma said, her eyes bright with excitement as she explored her new room. Thank you, Luna. Thank you for protecting the children, Isla replied, pulling the young woman into a hug. You were incredibly brave. I was terrified, Emma admitted. But I kept thinking about what you said, that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we never wanted to fight. Through the window, Isla could see Cade working with several pack members on the barn conversion. The restaurant was taking shape faster than she'd imagined, with pack members contributing skills she hadn't known they possessed. Yesterday, she discovered that quiet Marcus, not her ex-husband, but a pack member who rarely spoke, was actually a master carpenter who'd built custom furniture for high-end restaurants in his previous life. "How's your shoulder?" Diana asked, joining them in the cottage with paint samples for the common areas. Isla rolled her shoulder experimentally. The wound from Garrett's claws had healed remarkably fast, thanks to the mate bond's enhanced healing and pack medical knowledge. "Almost back to normal. Dr. Sarah says another week, and there won't even be a scar." "Good, because the council representatives are coming back tomorrow for the formal territory recognition ceremony," Diana said. "You'll want to look appropriately intimidating." Isla laughed. "Is that what Lunas are supposed to be? Intimidating? You captured and exiled a rogue alpha who'd been terrorizing the region for years," Diana pointed out. "I'd say intimidating is accurate." Through her bond with Cade, Isla felt his amusement at the conversation. He sent her a wave of love and admiration that made her chest warm. "Come see the progress on the restaurant." His thought came clearly through their connection. "I have a surprise for you." Isla excused herself and made her way to the barn, marveling at how comfortable ward jumping had become now that she practiced daily. One moment she was at the cottage. The next she was stepping through space to appear beside Cade in the barn's main dining area. "Show off," Cade said affectionately, pulling her into his arms for a kiss. "You're the one who told me to practice," Isla replied, melting into his embrace. "What's the surprise?" Cade gestured to the far wall, where Marcus and 2 other pack members had just finished installing something. Isla's breath caught. It was a massive mural, hand-painted, depicting the Colorado mountains with a full moon rising over the peaks. But woven throughout were subtle details. Wolves running through the forests, protective symbols disguised as decorative elements, and at the center, a silver-haired woman who could only be Vivian, standing watch over the territory she'd protected for 40 years. "It's beautiful," Isla whispered, tears threatening. "Who?" "Emma designed it," Cade said. "She's been working on it secretly for the past week. She said you needed something to honor Vivian's legacy while building your own." Through their bond, Isla felt Cade's love and pride, not just in her, but in the entire pack family they'd built together. "The restaurant opens in 3 weeks," Cade continued. "The barn conversion is ahead of schedule, your menu is finalized, and you've already got reservation requests from as far as Denver." "How did word spread so fast?" "Diana may have strategically leaked information to certain food bloggers," Cade admitted with a grin. "And the council's recognition of you as regional liaison has generated significant interest in the territory." Isla turned to face him fully, her hands on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat through their bond. "Are you okay with all this? The restaurant, the liaison work, the territory becoming less isolated." Cade cupped her face in his hands, his silver eyes serious. "I'm more than okay. I'm watching you become exactly who you were meant to be. Strong, creative, compassionate, building bridges between worlds. This is what true leadership looks like, Isla. Not domination, but inspiration." Isla corrected. "We're building this together." "Together," Cade agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that made her forget they were standing in the middle of a construction site. A diplomatic cough from the doorway interrupted them. "Sorry to intrude," Council Alpha Magdalene Cross said, her tone suggesting she wasn't sorry at all. "But we need to discuss tomorrow's ceremony." Isla and Cade separated reluctantly, though they remained close enough that their shoulders touched, a constant physical reminder of their bond. "I thought the ceremony wasn't until tomorrow afternoon," Cade said. "The formal ceremony isn't," Magdalene agreed, stepping into the barn and looking around with obvious approval. "But there's a private matter I need to discuss with you both first." She handed them a leather folder marked with the council's official seal. Isla opened it to find a formal document titled Proposal for Regional Sanctuary and Integration Center. "The council has been impressed with your work here," Magdalene explained. "Not just the defeat of Garrett, but the way you've begun integrating human and supernatural communities. The restaurant, the compact renewal, the cooperative pack structure. It's exactly the model we've been trying to develop for decades." "What's the proposal?" Cade asked, his alpha instincts already analyzing potential complications. "We want to officially designate this territory as a pilot program for supernatural human integration," Magdalene said. "You'd receive council funding, access to resources and expertise, and authority to establish protocols that could be replicated in other regions." Isla looked at Cade, communicating through their bond in the space of heartbeats. This was huge. Not just for them, but for the future of supernatural human relations across North America. What would it require from us? Isla asked carefully. Transparency, documentation, and quarterly reports to the council, Magdalene listed. You'd also be expected to host visiting PACs and human officials who want to learn from your model. Essentially, you'd become a teaching sanctuary as well as a protected territory. More people, more visibility, more responsibility, Cade summarized. Yes, Magdalene said bluntly. But also more support, more resources, and more impact. What you're building here could change supernatural society fundamentally. Through their bond, Isla felt Cade's excitement tempered by concern for her well-being. What do you want? He asked through their connection. I want to build something that matters, Isla replied. Something that protects people and creates possibilities. But only if we do it together. Always together, Cade confirmed. We'll need to discuss it with the pack, Isla said aloud. This affects everyone, not just us. Magdalene smiled. That's exactly the kind of leadership the council hoped to see. Take your time. The proposal stands regardless of when you decide. After Magdalene left, Isla and Cade stood together in the barn that would soon become a restaurant, looking out at the territory that had become their home. A year ago, I was signing divorce papers and trying to figure out who I was without Marcus, Isla said softly. Now I'm Luna of a werewolf pack, regional liaison for supernatural human relations, and apparently being offered the chance to create a model integration center. Overwhelming? Cade asked. Terrifying, Isla admitted. But also exciting. Is that crazy? If it is, we're crazy together, Cade said, pulling her close. Which is exactly how it should be. Through their bond, Isla felt his absolute confidence in her, his love and support, his excitement about the future they were building. I think we should do it, she said. Accept the council's proposal. Not right away. We need to establish the restaurant first, make sure the pack is stable. But eventually, yes. Then that's what we'll do, Cade agreed. One step at a time, building something beautiful together. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Isla felt a profound sense of rightness. She'd come to Colorado seeking solitude and found community. She'd run from love and discovered a mate. She'd inherited a lodge and built a sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring the formal ceremony, making their territory officially recognized by the council. Next month would bring the restaurant opening. Eventually would come the integration center, more responsibility, and more opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she stood in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by chosen family, on land she'd learned to protect, building a future that honored the past while creating something entirely new. Vivian would be proud, Cade said, as if reading her thoughts through their bond. I hope so, Isla replied. I hope she knew what she was giving me when she left me this place. She knew, Cade said with certainty. She knew exactly what you needed, even when you didn't. Through the barn's open doors, they could see pack members gathering for the evening meal. Adults and children, wolves and humans. All part of the family they'd chosen to build together. This was what healing looked like. This was what building looked like. This was what love looked like when it was given freely, supported unconditionally, and protected fiercely. And somewhere in the mountains that had witnessed her transformation, Isla was certain Vivian's spirit was smiling. Chapter 12, Ever After. 1 year later, Isla stood in the kitchen of Ember and Pine, the name she'd finally settled on for the restaurant, honoring both her Seattle roots and her Colorado home. Watching her sous chef plate the evening's special, wild mushroom risotto with herbs she'd foraged that morning from the mountain forests. Table 7 is ready for their entrees, called Maya, the human waitress who'd relocated from Denver specifically to work at what food critics were calling the most innovative farm-to-table experience in the Rockies. Through the kitchen's pass-through window, Isla could see the dining room filled to capacity, a mix of human tourists, local residents, and supernatural beings who'd learned to appreciate her cooking. The mural Emma had painted dominated one wall, and subtle ward symbols woven throughout the decor kept everyone safe while maintaining the restaurant's warm, welcoming atmosphere. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cade. Council delegation just arrived. Meeting in an hour. How are you feeling? Isla smiled, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. Nervous. Excited. Nauseous. The usual. I love you, came his immediate reply. All 3 of you. The pregnancy test had been positive just 2 weeks ago, and they'd only told Diana and the pack elders so far. Tonight's council meeting would be their first major event since discovering they were expecting twins. A rarity in werewolf-human pairings, according to Dr. Sarah, and a sign of how strong their mate bond had become. "Chef," Maya called. "The Thornwood Pack's table wants to send their compliments. They said the venison is the best they've had in decades." "Tell them I used their own recipe," Isla replied with a grin. "I just improved the seasoning." Through her bond with Cade, she felt his amusement. Several pack members were dining in the restaurant tonight, celebrating Marcus's promotion to head of construction for the Integration Center project that would break ground next month. The past year had transformed the territory beyond anything Isla had imagined when she'd first arrived, desperate for solitude and escape. The lodge now served as administrative headquarters for the regional sanctuary and integration center. The guest cottage housed visiting packs and human officials learning their collaborative model. And the restaurant had become neutral ground where supernatural and human communities mingled freely, unaware of or comfortable with the magical protections keeping everyone safe. "Service is wrapping up," her sous chef reported. "Last tables should be done in 30 minutes. "Perfect," Isla said, already untying her apron. "Maya, can you handle closing?" "Absolutely, chef. Go do your Luna thing." Isla laughed at the casual way her dual roles had become accepted among her staff. Half of them knew about the supernatural world, and the other half simply thought she was married to a very private environmental consultant who worked with wildlife preservation. She ward-jumped from the restaurant to the lodge, still her favorite magical ability, and arrived to find the main room transformed for the council meeting. Magdalene Cross stood with two other council members Isla had come to know well over the past year. Alpha James Rivera, who'd initially been skeptical but had become a strong supporter, and Alpha Chun, who'd helped them navigate the complex bureaucracy of council approval processes. "Luna Winters," Magdalene greeted her warmly. "Or should I say, Chef Winters? The venison was exceptional. You ate at the restaurant. We wanted to experience what everyone's been talking about," James said. "It's impressive. You've created something truly unique." Kate emerged from Vivian's old study, now their shared office, and moved immediately to Isla's side. Through their bond, she felt his pride and love, along with a hint of protectiveness that had intensified since they'd confirmed the pregnancy. "Shall we begin?" Alpha Chun suggested, gesturing to the seating area where Diana and several other pack leaders waited. For the next hour, they reviewed the past year's progress. Successful compact renewals with 3 additional packs, the restaurant's economic impact on the local community, documentation of 23 different supernatural species now peacefully integrated within the territory's boundaries, and preliminary designs for the integration center that would formally open next spring. "The council is extremely pleased," Magdalene said finally. "So pleased, in fact, that we have a proposal." Isla and Cade exchanged glances. The last council proposal had changed their lives. This one would likely be equally significant. "We want to replicate this model in 5 other regions across North America," Magdalene continued, "which means we need you to train the alphas and human liaisons who'll be leading those territories." "Training program?" Isla asked. "More like an academy," James clarified. "Based here, using your territory as the living laboratory. Participants would spend 6 months learning from your methods, observing your operations, and developing customized approaches for their own regions." "That's a significant commitment," Cade said carefully, "which is why the council is prepared to provide substantial funding and resources," Alpha Chin added, "including staff support, facility expansion, and stipends for both of you as lead instructors." Through their bond, Isla felt Cade's excitement tempered by concern for her health, for the babies, for whether they could handle such increased responsibility. "What do you think?" she asked through their connection. "I think we could change the world," Cade replied. "But only if you're comfortable with it. The pregnancy changes things." "The pregnancy changes everything," Isla agreed. "But it doesn't change who we are or what we're building." "Before we answer," Isla said aloud, "there's something you should know." She looked at Diana, who smiled encouragingly, and at the pack members who'd become her family. Then she took Cade's hand and said the words that would make it real. "We're expecting twins. Due next spring, around the same time the integration center opens." The room erupted in congratulations, Diana pulling Isla into a fierce hug, pack members celebrating with howls and laughter, even the council representatives offering genuine warmth and excitement. Well, Magdalene said once the celebration calmed, that certainly adds complexity to the training program timeline. But it doesn't make it impossible, James added thoughtfully. If anything, it demonstrates exactly what we're trying to achieve: supernatural and human families building futures together, creating the next generation of integrated communities. We'd want to delay the first training cohort until after the babies are born, Cade said. Give us time to adjust to parenthood before taking on teaching responsibilities. That's reasonable, Alpha Chin agreed. We could use the extra time to select participants carefully and develop curriculum. Perhaps start the first cohort next autumn. Isla looked around the room, at the pack that had become her family, at the territory that had become her home, at the mate who'd helped her discover strength she'd never known she possessed. A year ago, she'd been signing divorce papers and trying to figure out who she was without Marcus. Now she was Luna of a thriving pack, owner of a successful restaurant, regional liaison for supernatural human relations, and about to become a mother. It was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely perfect. We accept, Isla said firmly. We'll develop the training program, host the academy, and help create integration centers across North America. Through their bond, she felt Cade's absolute support and love. Together, he added, as we do everything. After the council representatives departed and the pack celebration wound down, Isla and Cade found themselves alone on the lodge's porch, watching stars emerge over the mountains that had witnessed their transformation. Twins, Cade said softly, his hand resting on her stomach where their children grew. I still can't quite believe it. Neither can I, Isla admitted. A year ago, I couldn't imagine trusting anyone enough to build a life with them. Now I'm building a family. The best kind of family, Cade said. Chosen, earned, protected fiercely. Through their bond, Isla felt his wonder and joy, his protective instincts already extending to their unborn children, his absolute certainty that their future would be extraordinary. What do you think Vivian would say? Isla asked. About all of this? Cade was quiet for a moment, considering. I think she'd say she knew exactly what she was doing when she left you this place. That she saw your potential long before you did. That she's proud of the Luna you've become and the family you're creating. I wish I'd known her better, Isla said wistfully. Spent more time with her before she died. You know her now, Cade pointed out. Through her journals, her magic, her legacy. Everything we've built stands on the foundation she created. That's a pretty remarkable connection. Isla thought about Vivian's letter, the one she'd finally read 6 months ago, after the restaurant opened, and she'd felt truly settled in her new life. Her gray tant's elegant handwriting had conveyed wisdom, encouragement, and absolute confidence that Isla would find her way. You're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and capable of extraordinary things, Vivian had written. Trust your instincts, protect what matters, and never apologize for claiming your power. The mountains will teach you who you really are, let them. The mountains had taught her. So had Cade and the pack, and the challenges she'd never wanted but had risen to meet anyway. I love you, Isla said, turning in Cade's arms to face him fully. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I love you too, Cade replied. Thank you for being brave enough to stay when leaving would have been easier. Leaving was never really an option, Isla admitted. Not once I met you. Mate bonds are powerful that way, Cade said with a slight smile. This isn't just about the mate bond, Isla said firmly. I chose you, Cade. Every day, in every way, I choose you. The bond just made it easier to recognize what was already true. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, building something beautiful from pain and courage and love. From inside the lodge came the sound of pack members settling in for the night, children's laughter, adults' conversation, the comfortable rhythms of family. From the restaurant down the hill came the last patrons departing, Maya calling good night, the satisfying conclusion of another successful service. And throughout it all, the mountains stood watch, ancient, patient, protective. The same mountains that had witnessed Vivian's 40 years of guardianship, that had seen Isla arrive broken and watched her become whole, that would shelter their children and the generations to come. Ready for bed? Cade asked. Tomorrow's going to be busy, the integration center groundbreaking, plus 3 reservation requests from packs wanting to visit. Tomorrow's always busy, Isla laughed. But yes, let's go to bed. They walked into their home. No longer Vivian's lodge, but truly theirs, and Isla felt the profound satisfaction of belonging completely. She'd inherited a lodge and found a destiny. She'd run from love and discovered a mate. She'd sought solitude and built a community. She'd believed she was broken and learned. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and joys she couldn't yet imagine. Twins to raise, an academy to build, a territory to protect, a restaurant to run, a model to perfect, a world to change. It was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely perfect. And she couldn't wait to begin. 3 years later, Isla watched from the lodge's porch as her 3-year-old twins, Evie and Rowan, chased butterflies through the meadow, their laughter echoing off the mountains. Evie showed early signs of inherited magic, making flowers bloom with her touch, while Rowan had already experienced his first shift, a rare early development that marked him as an unusually powerful alpha in training. The integration center stood completed on the eastern edge of the property, a beautiful timber and stone complex that currently hosted its 3rd training cohort. 15 alphas and human liaisons learning the collaborative model that had proven so successful. The restaurant had expanded to include a teaching kitchen where Isla trained young chefs, both human and supernatural, in the art of foraging and sustainable cooking. Maya had been promoted to general manager, and Ember and Pine now had a 6-month waiting list for reservations. "They're getting fast," Kate observed, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Rowan almost caught that butterfly." "He gets his speed from you," Isla replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Evie gets her stubbornness from me." Through their bond, she felt Cade's amusement and love, along with contentment so deep it made her chest ache in the best way. "Diana says the council wants to expand the program again," Cade mentioned, requesting 10 more integration centers by year's end. "Are we ready for that? Are we ever ready for anything?" Cade countered. "We just adapt and build and figure it out together." Isla laughed because he was right. They'd built something extraordinary not through careful planning, but through courage and love and absolute trust in each other. "I got a letter from Marcus today," Isla said casually. Cade tensed slightly. "Your ex? He's out of prison. Wanted to apologize for everything, said he'd heard about the restaurant and was impressed." Isla sipped her coffee. "He also asked if I'd consider hiring him as a line cook." "What did you say?" "I said no, obviously. But I also said I'd forgiven him, and I hoped he'd find his own path." Isla leaned into Cade's warmth. "Forgiveness doesn't mean giving second chances to people who hurt us. It just means not letting their mistakes define our future." "Wise words, Luna," Cade said softly. "I learned from the best," Isla replied. Evie and Rowan came running up the porch steps, breathless and glowing with joy. "Mama, Papa, watch what I can do," Evie announced, touching the porch railing and making wildflowers bloom from the wood grain. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Isla said, pulling her daughter onto her lap. "I almost caught 3 butterflies," Rowan declared. "Next time I'll get 4. "I believe you," Cade said, ruffling his son's hair. As the children settled in for their afternoon story, a tale about a fierce woman named Vivian who protected the mountains, Isla felt the profound rightness of the life they'd created. She'd come to Colorado seeking escape and found purpose. She'd inherited property and gained family. She'd believed she was broken and discovered she was just becoming. And now, sitting on the porch of a lodge that had witnessed miracles, surrounded by children and mate and chosen family, building something that mattered with every breath and choice and moment of courage. Now, she was exactly where she belonged. The mountains stood watch, ancient and patient and protective. The territory thrived, safe and integrated and hopeful. The future stretched endlessly forward, full of possibilities she couldn't yet imagine but would face with absolute certainty, because she wouldn't face them alone. She had Cade and the pack and the twins and the community they'd built together. She had magic and purpose and love so deep it had rewritten the definition of what was possible. She had everything, and it was more than enough. It was perfect. The end.